first thing we should do is just preface
what's going on.
What we're doing.
Yeah.
Because this is cool. This is a new thing.
Yeah.
And this is one of those weird things where we talked about it for a while and we said to ourselves, I feel like we're always playing the game. Is it worth the money? Is it worth the time and energy? That's like the bootstrap vibe. Do we want to invest the time on staff where we know everybody is super busy to do something that we don't necessarily know is going to be successful, which is the eternal anxiety.
I love this point because it's, I think sometimes we forget that it's all about trial and error. It's all about, not seeing life as something static, as something isolated in time, but always as trying to evolve, as moving forward and figuring stuff out and being happy about succeeding just as much as making mistakes.
Exactly. You win or you learn. That's the cliche.
It's a cliche and it's so true.
It's true. So what are we doing? We're doing a webcast. And what we said the idea behind it is that our vision is media for everyone, media with everyone. If we want to be the leaders in the digital storytelling space, we have to be the hub of the wheel. So we have to be the place where folks are engaging in conversation. And they're not engaging in conversation from a particular editorial stance, but it's more about just coming to the table and as we always talk about, right, just being a tool, being something that a creative or a communicator can use to articulate a point, not necessarily a good knife or a bad knife, but just a knife, right? So not a good or a bad webcast or microphone, but just getting people in the room.
Exactly, and it's just something that we've been learning throughout the years, right? Especially with our team, as we, one day we're just the two of us, another day, we're 10 people. And
can we talk about that? How long ago was that when
it was just two of us?
When we were deciding whether or not we actually wanted to do video. Because there was a point in time where we sat down and we had a meeting and both of us said, oh, is this actually worth the time to do the video?
And that conversation actually lasted, I remember, about 6 months of us experimenting because we didn't have that many video projects to start with, right? Gigsy was, when I met you, and you were running this first iteration of Gigsy, it was solely photography. And I don't know if you remember, but we got together because of a video project. For 4.0. So, and that was October 2016. And
how do you remember that?
I'm good with dates.
Time to me is just things that happened. I was going to call Denali a couple of days ago and ask her if I had long hair when I was working for Youth Run Nova. Because I didn't remember. I had that thought this morning.
What'd she tell you?
I haven't reached out yet, so I still don't know. So as a preface to that, I suppose, we should introduce that we are Rob Warren, Oli Alexander. So we're the partners of Gigsy. You're our current acting chief executive officer. I'm our current chief evangelist, the dude out there who's creating the hype and excitement around what it is that we're doing, just as a preface, so humans actually know who these two humans are and that we're both working on this Gigsy project, this Gigsy thing.
This Gigsy
with
dream.
A beautiful and talented team of humans.
It's amazing. But yeah, to answer the video question, we hired our first official lead video editor. We brought him in end of July of last year. So it's been only 1 year since we kind of officialized that we were going to do video as part of our product. And before then we did a bunch of videos, but we were just experimenting. I remember we were trying to figure out different video products, what the market was looking for, and kind of unsure if that was even going to be a product that would make sense for us to, because it's so intense. There's so many layers to it.
So 2 years ago, or a year ago, 2 years ago we initiated, roundabout a year ago we have an editor, and now there's lead photographers, videographers, apprentices, manager, assistant. There's
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
9 folks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, yesterday we were running. We were going through a pipeline meeting with all of our projects. We have 46 video projects currently being executed that have already been sold, that are currently in the production pipeline. 46 video projects. And that's not even talking about all the photo projects we have.
Oh my goodness.
And so, thinking about that and the fact that we have 9 folks, the ratio doesn't even make sense, right?
How does it work?
Well, you were saying that our mission is media for everyone, media with everyone, and that that applies both internally and externally. But externally we're illustrating to the picture to the community is that we're a tool. We're here to produce your content. Internally, we see ourselves as a platform. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the magic starts. That's all these talks that you and I have been having for the past 2 years about how to create an organic platform of people that are working in synergy, but at the same time, everyone knows their roles really, 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 really well, so we can have a very efficient system. So how does that work? Well, we have a very efficient system that the sales team hands every project and every client to a pre-production team, and the pre-production team has a very efficient way of processing that information, reaching out to the client, asking the right questions, extracting all the information, because we are 100% client-centered. And that information going from pre-production to production to post-production to delivery, and being archived in our system and going back just very efficiently. We don't have the mindset. We kind of reinvented the wheel. We don't have the mindset of big production houses and tons of layers. We're trying to optimize as much as we can, figuring out the quality that our clients are looking for, the deliverable times that our clients are looking for, and the budget for that.
It's a weird new part. It's so new. That's the weird thing, right?
New media.
It's new, but nobody knows what new means. I read a news article yesterday about a guy who was one of these legacy media tycoons, and he just started a company called New TV. And this company, New TV, is about creating content specific for small screens. And the form is short form, so 10-minute segments, 10-minute episodes, which is crazy. And I read this thing and I thought to myself, holy smokes, like this is a platform that is gonna try to, it's New TV, it's monetizing and competing with something like a YouTube. And the fact that we are seeing that emerge right now is fascinating. The fact that content coming on small screens is becoming so popular is fascinating. And there was a statistic listed in there, or a fact rather, that said that in standard TV productions, you can expect to pay $100,000 per minute of content.
What?
So industry standard, and I don't know if it's right or wrong. This is what the article said. $100,000 per minute of content. What we're doing is so fractional to that. If you do minutes per content for the kind of content we're making, it can get as low as a couple $100 or like the low thousands of dollars per minute. What do you see happening in the bigger ecosystem? Have you noticed a change from when you started as just a documentarian, just doing solo projects, to where we are now?
Oh my God, 100%, right? I give you the same question because we've been seeing it together, and it's been a trip, right? Every single week, the multiple meetings that you and I have are usually we usually bring in this exact observation, right? What is happening with our clients? What's happening with society around us? regarding the content that they're trying to consume. So since we're trying to figure out what type of photography, what type of videography, how long, and so on and so forth, the type of content that we're providing our clients, since we're trying to figure out what they want, what they're looking for, I think it's been fascinating because what we see here is people incorporating short form video, shorter and shorter, into their day-to-day communication. So I think just organizations are figuring out that it's such an effective way of communicating. Now, I think that for me, the most fascinating piece of all of this is not that we're figuring out how useful photo and video is. I think for me, what's most fascinating is, given that the ecosystem nowadays is so saturated with content, it's so hard to find, content that is either that has depth. I think depth is a very important thing.
It's like quality is always going to count.
Quality is always going to count, but not like, a lot of photographers and videographers, when they think about quality, the first thing that pops to mind is the image quality, the sound quality, the production quality, and something that we're doing a lot in Gigsy, that we're talking a lot about, is the quality of the story, how deep, how efficiently, effectively, and what's the depth of what we're communicating that the client wants, be it a product, a service, or their organization. So that's on the client side. I think that's interesting to see as a society, that people are not only incorporating more videos and photos, especially short form, but they're focusing in making them more meaningful and tighter and deeper. Internally, it's been very interesting, as we speak to our team and talk about motivation and talk about what wakes us up every day, because many times we're so inspired by movies and documentaries, and that we're producing a lot of commercial content here, and so it's important that we always talk to our team and understand what their motivation levels is like producing this type of content, because we're crazy about it, because we love it. And for me, it's extremely meaningful, because you are helping someone, or many someones in an organization, communicate effectively what it is that they do, what it is that what their passion is, what their products that they put so much time in their service, put so much time into creating. That for me is an insane motivation. And doing that with depth, doing that in a way that is effectively communicating something that has a soul is a huge challenge, both externally and internally.
How do we nurture that? Because there is this interesting, and I know we've had this conversation a lot of times with bringing folks into the team, where we've tried to draw the distinction between being an artist and an artisan.
Yeah.
So we always want people that are artists, but it's more important to be successful in the organization at being an artisan. And we always talk about artisan as just being obsessed with the craft. So really loving the challenge of having to jump in and do something new, to engage, to be in the process. It's like a workout. It's always going to be hard. It's always going to be hard. People that do yoga for 10 years, they get into a yoga session, they're like, oh, this is awful. But it's the process that you're committing to. I don't know if you've heard the phrase when folks say, inspiration is for amateurs, the rest of us just show up and get to work.
Yeah.
It feels like that's what you're describing, nurturing that idea. Did you have that transition in your career from the artist to artisan? And what happened?
Oh, that's such a good question. It's an intense question, right? Because it talks a lot about the ego. It talks a lot about how you wake up in the morning and approach your day and motivate yourself. And but yeah, we we hired together, so it's kind of interesting being the one who's answering the question, given that we're figuring this stuff out together. But I think one thing that we figured out a long time ago is that we don't want to work every single day frustrated. Frustration sucks. No one likes frustration. And one of the main sources of frustration in an artistic realm, in a creative realm, such as photography and videography, is when you're not on the same page as your client. When your client wants something and you want something, and you're doing something different. That causes a lot of frustration to both parties. So, as we're moving on in our careers, first, before we started Gigsy and now inside of Gigsy, I think one thing became very clear, which is you can either fight your client because you have a specific vision that you want to show the world, or you are going to try to understand as much as you possibly can what your client wants, execute that, and of course, there's always going to be gaps, and that's where you're going to insert your creativity. So I think that's the formula we figured out. So
where'd you learn that?
Trial and error.
Was there a project that you had in your personal career or a moment that's striking, or it's just?
I think it was more of an organic kind of fluid thing, whereas as a freelancer, I was just trying so hard to give the Oli style to things. So, like you were saying, I'm a documentary filmmaker originally. I love the handheld look. I had a more raw feel, etc., etc. There were a ton of elements, visual elements, audio elements, how it was. I like my edits to be long. I'm not, I wasn't looking for anything succinct. So many different elements, and I was realizing that resonated with a bunch of my clients. That also didn't resonate with a bunch of other clients. I just didn't like the frustration, so it kind of organically, I'm someone, if someone criticizes me, obviously like every human, I'm going to be defensive, at least inside of me, but then my immediate instinct is like, let me figure out what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong, and so I can change. And so when I saw myself and my clients sometimes being frustrated, I'm like, I have to figure out why, because I'm putting so much work, and what's the whole point of this? I'm being commissioned by a client, and then it goes back to motivation. Why am I even doing this? I'm doing this because I love to have a camera in my hand. I love to produce a creative type of work. And then there's this stigma that commercial work is not creative, which is total BS. It's not true at all.
I hear that all the time.
I find commercial work more challenging and thus more creative than just an art project. Because an art project is just free. You just gotta. So yeah, you can just flow, but in a commercial project, you got restraints, and those restraints force you into being way more focused in your creativity. I think it's a huge challenge. So I don't remember of any specific project that did that change in mindset, but what I do know is that nowadays at Gigsy, we take this extremely seriously. And it's all about mentality.
Yeah.
It's all about how you view yourself. We put, for us, after all this realization, we decided to be client-centered. We decided to put the client in first place. And so the briefing always is in our team, in pre-production, we have to ask the right questions, and we have to figure out how to extract from the client's entire vision and needs and wants and desires. And what you end up realizing is that, a lot of clients will just say like, no, you're the professional, you're the creative, you just go do your work. What they don't realize is most of the time they have a very clear vision in their minds. They just didn't know how to express it. So I think that for us has been a beautiful challenge, a fun challenge to figure out what are the right questions to ask, how to then put that into what we call a treatment, right? To condense that so that whoever is going to shoot this and whoever is going to edit this everyone's speaking the same language. Someone who has too much of an artist mentality will not necessarily do that. Their motivation is not necessarily to understand from the client first what they want,
Sure.
and then create a plan, execute the plan, and insert creativity throughout.
Sure. It's treated as an all creative enterprise instead of in service to somebody else's story where you're helping map it and frame the conversation.
Exactly. And so I just find it all fascinating, especially how your questions, how you're conducting the questions, because one thing just connects to the other,
Mm-hmm.
right? What we're doing at Gigsy connects 100% to why we are so thorough in our hiring process to make sure that we're hiring people that have the right motivation. We love the craft of photography. We love the craft of videography. And because we love the craft, we want to have opportunities to produce. Because the only way to do that is if someone's paying you. A client's paying you.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to make sure that clients are coming back, especially the clients that we brought into the house already, that they're coming back. So we have to make them happy. We have to, if you're being commissioned to do something, at the end of that cycle, you want to make sure that whoever commissioned you has a huge smile on their face, is
Sure.
super satisfied, so that they're coming back. That's the only way that Gigsy is sustainable.
It's almost like a restaurant in a way.
Totally.
How has that been? So we mentioned that the team has grown a ton and very quickly, and not without entrepreneurial growing pains and learning.
Oh my God.
I know that I've felt many times, and you felt it as well, where we've kind of looked at each other, and after 3 months of doing something, gone, I don't know what my job is. Like, I don't know what I do here. And there's this strange feeling of always making yourself obsolete. And one thing I would do that I had shown you before was I would write down
Good job description.
my job description. I would literally write down, here is what I'm supposed to do. Here are the 4 or 5 things that consists of. And then I would put percentages of how much time in my week I should spend doing those things that were my job. And I would have to get up in the morning, and I had it printed out and shoved into my notebook and shoved into my laptop. And I would have to read that, because otherwise I would sit there and I'd look at the computer screen and an email would come in and I would I'd answer it, and then half the day would be gone. And I'd be like, what the hell, what am I doing? How has that been for you, transitioning from somebody who is the maven of quality and is deep in the weeds of the technology and the way that things need to be executed process-wise? How has that process been in growing the team, and what is that like?
I mean, I learned a lot from you putting those job descriptions. I confess that I got very inspired by that. Ended up doing the same thing because you're 100. That's it, right? It's I'm originally Brazilian, and
You're still Brazilian.
I'm still Brazilian, not only originally.
Every time I think it's hilarious.
But it's all just in Brazil. There's an organization that I bet we have in the U.S. quite a few that is only for CEOs or just C-suite and entrepreneurs, and it's an organization for them to meet and hang out and talk. And the reason this organization exists is because, and that's their slogan, it's being an entrepreneur or being a C-suite is very lonely and very hard, because no one's figuring it out for you. You have to figure it out. And nothing came with a manual. You kind of, and what you well said, our objective, our focus is to make us obsolete as the team grows, so that we can grow the company, so we can bring in more people to do better and more tasks and so on and so forth. So it's extremely confusing and frustrating at times. And thank God I have a business partner that I can, at the end of the day, go have an old fashioned, and we can kind of situate ourselves again of what's going on. But in regards to your question, in regards to building the team, in the beginning of the podcast, the webcast, we were talking about how just 1 year ago we hired our first video editor, even though we've been doing video for 2 years.
Yeah.
In a whole year, who was doing all the video projects? You and I. We were out there planning, scripting. We were out there shooting. We were out there improvising, and we came back and we were here editing and delivering. It's really bizarre then to hire someone to do part of that job, and then hire someone else to shoot, and hire someone else to create treatments. And realizing that even though you're creating something that is more of a craft and the focus is more to be an artisan, there's bias everywhere. It changes from person to person. Everyone's inputting their personality, even though we are catering to the client, because both can coexist. And so it's been really crazy to, on one hand, offload your brain, systemize it so that you're not doing all the pieces of the puzzle. And by now I don't shoot, I don't edit, I don't create scripts. I'm just supervising, 46 projects going by and making sure that they're being done with quality and the right time and so on and so forth. But that took still takes a lot of effort for us to systemize this correctly, offload one's brain, and at the same time leave enough space so that during all those steps you're not making it so tight so that people can't
be human
and execute. So
that plays in
did I answer your question?
It makes me think of what you say about this idea of ego, because I remember this moment that follows when we kind of sit and look at each other and say, what is my job here? Of then feeling very small, of feeling like a little kid who shows up and you see everybody else doing stuff, and you're like, oh, what do I do now? Who's gonna play with me?
Right.
Which is kind of it's a strange thing. It's like you said, that sort of that feeling of isolation. Your job is to make yourself obsolete and to introduce other people to the organization and to the way things operate, because that's the nature of growing. But there's this hurdle internally that you have to get over, at least I've found, with knowing that what you're doing was special at one point. It's not special anymore.
Yeah.
You can train somebody else to do it, and because they're going to be doing it exclusively, they're going to be doing it better than you were doing it.
Yeah.
And that's scary. I think that's something that a lot of founders and organizational leaders have to grapple with. It's something I know that has been very in my mind over the last couple of months as we've been designing a lot of the sales, the marketing, the communication side, and starting to offload those responsibilities. There was a bit of ego when you say, at least for me, I say, well, who else is going to do sales? There's a point of pride to say,
oh my God,
I did sales and I was the tip of the spear. I was the guy in there with the machete in the wood and forging these relationships. And as we talk about bringing on a salesperson, then the thought comes, well, can somebody really do it? And of course somebody can do it. There are salespeople.
But I remember, that's such a good point. I'm known in this organization to be, well, the joke was, right, one of our values, Gigsy good. Well, how did that expression come up? Because one of our photographers and videographers was so frustrated that I kept having him go back and doing so many iterations of these edits that I was like, Oli, do you want this to be good or do you want this to be Gigsy good? And that's how we created this value, and now it's it's something that's on our wall and we even joke about. But it has to do a lot about this. I am not out there producing the great majority of treatments. I'm not out there shooting. I go to a lot of shoots, but Nathan and Kyron are the ones who are mainly shooting nowadays, and I'm definitely not there hands-on editing, even though I do quality checks every day with them. Does that mean that I'm not producing these? By no means, right? We have created an obsession over quality here. And when you mix quality with very short delivery times, then it becomes even more challenging, which I find super fun. But it's all to say that accepting that I'm an animal, I'm a human, I'm just 31 years old, I'm as wise as I think I can be at this moment with my experience level, and heck yes, I have an ego. And that's not a problem, and I try to contain it. But yes, at the end of the day, nothing will leave this organization, whether we have 10 people in this organization or 100 people, without me looking at it and saying, this is awesome, this is amazing, this is Gigsy good. And so, bringing it back to your point, I'm so proud nowadays and so wowed by just how talented and capable our team is. But it's our team, we have everyone's an independent human, but once they're in Gigsy, they are doing something in a way that we took years and years and years and years to craft, and I take pride in that. And so, talking about the sales piece, I think it's the same thing. Watching you build relationships with clients in the community is so insanely inspiring. And I know that it's not only me saying, because you have taken team members with you in sales meetings, and they've all come back wowed, just because it's so natural, and there's an art form to that, there's a beauty to that, and you're going to incorporate that as you build this team, and take pride in that. So I don't think one thing is separated from I don't think because now there's a whole team working on things that and it's not you alone selling or me alone shooting and editing, that there's not a humongous piece of you in that.
That's a lot of the excitement in watching, in setting the groundwork. Because first you start and you do the work and your ego's in it, and it's more about, if I don't do this correctly, I'm not just failing the vision or the organizational value, it's going to embarrass me.
Yeah.
And I don't do bad work. So it's a point of pride, it's a point of ego. And then what it sounds like you're describing is that it goes from being a point of personal ego to then being something where there's a team executing it, and now it's pride in the whole team.
Yeah.
Which is really an interesting transition. I think it's something that we've also talked about that makes us really excited. One thing that makes me really excited, I know it makes you really excited, is when teammates dive in and are executing in a way where we can see that there is that sense of deep pride and commitment to the work. That to me is one of the most exciting things. I know we've talked about it a few times in regards to our lead shooter Nathan, who on multiple occasions, particularly me when I was dilly-dallying or dragging my butt on something, has taken no pause to look at a treatment plan for a particular execution and say, this is the thing that has to be done. And there's nothing cooler than that, than seeing somebody who loves what they do, is so committed to executing the thing that they care about. They're dedicated to the craft, that they don't care who you are. They're not looking at, they have a task to perform. If I'm in the middle of a marathon and the Pope is waving at me, I'm not going to stop racing. I mean, well, first off, I'm Jewish, so I would wave to the Pope, but I wouldn't stop. But there is nothing that could stop me if I'm racing a marathon and I'm really going for a PR. There's nothing that could stop me from just being entirely centered and committed to that moment. And if it's a famous person on the sidelines, I'm not going to stop and chat with them. And there's something about that kind of mentality, that kind of goal-oriented perseverance, that sort of athleticism behind that goal orientation, that when we see it is amazing. Because it feels like the value is now held with each individual, and it's in service to the goal, and it's not about trying to make someone happy. It's not about trying to look good to somebody. I love it. I love when there's the pushback, because I know I can be a little goofy. I can show up and distract the whole office, and anytime somebody boots me out of the editing office,
I love it.
I love it.
I love it. I get booted out of there.
It's the perfect statement. It's, I see you.
I respect you.
That's great, but you
get
gotta
out of here. Yeah.
Have you seen that? And
oh my God. Like? What is that like? That is like the biggest challenge that we had. I feel team building. I was telling our manager the other day. Hiring is the biggest challenge that I at least have as an entrepreneur. I never knew it was going to be this hard. And I used to hire when I used to work for organizations before, completely different when it's your organization. It just is. So take Nathan for example, which is weird to talk about Nathan because he's right there.
He's sitting here.
But it's crazy because a few times now I'm at home, I'm in a bad mood or something, and I told this to Nathan already. And I actually look forward to coming to the office if I'm going to go to a shoot with Nathan, because he is such good vibes. And so my wife, who hasn't met Nathan yet, jokes all about. She's like, just whenever I'm in a bad mood, she's like, just go meet with Nathan, go shoot something with Nathan. And I can say this about quite a few people in our organization, and I think we've been hiring really well after a ton of trial and error, after a ton of hiring correctly and incorrectly. I think we have put together a team that we're really proud of. And it's so insanely challenging to bring in someone in your organization that has the right vibe, like what we're talking about, and is fun to work with, but at the same time is super serious, is focused, and has incorporated this culture that we have created because it's meaningful to us, because we have learned organically that this is an important thing, this is an important value, this is our mission. We have put it in our walls. These guys have incorporated it and almost treat us in a weird way when I receive, like almost daily, like you were saying, guys, please leave the editing room, we're trying to concentrate. And inside of me, I'm like, what? Oh my God, totally true, let me get out of here. And it's amazing. So it goes back to what you were talking about, how it feels to go, from us doing everything and now having a team. This is 100% part of it. It feels magical because it's such a learning thing, right? If I were to guess before having 10 folks in the organization, if I were to guess how it was going to be, I would have never imagined that it was going to be like this. I would have never imagined that we would have folks that would at the same time be having so much fun but be so serious at their craft and treating it as a craft rather than just their artwork, and all these points that we're talking about that have taken us many iterations to implement and are still going to take many more iterations to perfect. It's been an amazing trip. They say, well, I totally incorporate that. This is a big realization for me, and especially this year. it is definitely, for me, definitely not about the goal, or very minimally about what the end goal is. It is way more about the trip. You know, it's way more about setting a goal that is going to permit you to have a very rich and fun and exciting trip. And the trip has been fascinating.
Isn't that the wildest thing? And it's never what gets you into the game. We're doing, so our friends at 4.0 Schools are running their Essentials program this weekend.
Which you're coaching?
Where they bring very early stage entrepreneurs. So people who are at the point where they are getting comfortable even referring to themselves as an entrepreneur.
Right.
And they're dealing with this idea, this identity idea. Well, what does that mean? It's an idea. What am I supposed to do? I just make some stuff and then I'm a business person? It's always so powerful to see folks who come in at the beginning, and so often the orientation is like this. They are die hard about, I just want to start a school. I just want to start this organization. Here's what it's going to look like. I'm just going to start this business and here's how it's going to run. And we have this thing, I think it's universal. It's a hump that you have to get over, I think, if you're going to be successful as an entrepreneur. Where you start with the end. And we're constantly told, start with the end in mind, define your goals, define where you're going, have a clear sense. Yeah, that's cool, that's great. It's very important to kind of orient you, to be your North Star. But the first thing you have to disabuse folks of when they come in and they're so committed to, this is the way that my organization is going to look, here are the people who are going to be hired, here's how the people are going to come in, you have to disabuse them of the notion that any of that is ever going to happen.
Oh my God, yes.
Any of that is ever going to happen. Because inevitably we come up with ideas, and that initial attitude of, well, we'll just do it this way, gets tested by reality, and then reality goes, about that. And then you become in love with the process. You become in love with the idea of the growing, and so like you say, the goal is more of a North Star, which you run after a little while, and then you go, this is a nicer North Star, let's do that one now.
It's so scary in practice. It's so scary to balance this out. It's so scary to have a north, have a business plan, run and respect this north and go towards this north, but have the sensitivity of determining when to change or what decisions to make to even get to that north, but not necessarily how you originally created. And that's something, it's funny because that has to do with our relationship for me as well, where I'm a big planner, and I'm always mapping things out, and I'm always trying to figure out, I'm always planning. And when I met you, it was a source of a lot of fascination.
You can just say frustration.
But it wasn't at all. To see someone who was just, had a plan, but you were, well, I call you a tractor, right? You were just
Complementarily.
You were just tractoring. You were just moving. And this whole done is better than perfect kind of thing applies a lot to it. That you're just focused on doing, on moving forward, and we're kind of, and I'm always scared of, I'm always kind of walking on eggshells on how we're going to take our next step, because I don't want to burn bridges along the way. And a lot of scary stuff has happened to us along the way, but it also has proven to be not that scary.
Yeah.
There's always a way around it. But because we just tractored, just because we continued moving rather than stalling because we were overwhelmed by a plan or whatever, or a situation, that permitted us to learn from experience and continue growing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's all to say that, it goes back to all the challenges of being an entrepreneur, and the balance between how much do I plan and how much do I just put everything aside and just do it. And I think there's a balance. I don't think if you just go and do it without a plan, it's a shot on the foot. You're going to do a lot of double work, triple work. You're going to wake up in the morning and not know where you're going. But if you're putting all your energy in a plan and you're trying to execute that plan as much as you can, you're probably never going to get anywhere. That business is probably going to fail because you're going to get so frustrated and overwhelmed, and it's not how the world works. There's a middle line. There's a shade of gray there that you have to find. That's just how we should live our everyday life, not so stiff, kind of.
That's a good moral.
That's a good moral.
We just broke 45. What do you say we shut it down?
This was a great conversation.
Thank you for being our number one.
Thank you.
Our
for
first
being our
person
number
to
one.
know more in a good conversation.
This was great. Rob, very great. I love it. And thank you, team.
Cool.
Awesome. Let's cut.